A 174-year-old California bank, Wells Fargo, quietly wires $16 billion out of the state and into Florida. No riots, no headlines screaming crime. But if you live in California, Florida, or have a dollar in a U.S. bank, this move should scare you more than any robbery. California's 174-year-old bank, Wells Fargo, moves to Florida with $16 billion. But that single line hides a much darker story. Because when an institution born in the gold rush days of San Francisco starts shifting tens of billions of dollars to a low-tax state, on the other side of the country, it isn't just saving on taxes, it's abandoning the very state that made it rich, and quietly joining a financial migration that could hollow out entire cities without a single law ever being broken. Tonight on Obscured Crimes, we're going to dissect how a bank can move $16 billion without ever touching a suitcase. Why Florida is becoming a magnet for America's richest money, and whether this is just smart business or the most legal kind of economic betrayal. If you stay with me to the end, you'll see why this story is less about Wells Fargo itself and more about where your future, your job, and your taxes are being decided in rooms you'll never see. When average people hear Wells Fargo moves $16 billion to Florida, they imagine armored trucks, guards, and mountains of dollar bills rolling down a highway. But in 2026 America, that's not how power moves. Banks shift money in three main ways, and almost all of them are invisible. First, a line on a balance sheet inside Wells Fargo's systems. Deposits and assets are grouped under different entities: trust companies, wealth management units, regional subsidiaries. With a few board decisions and regulatory filings, those units can be re-domiciled. Yesterday, the legal home of these assets was California. Today, the legal home is Florida. No cash was moved. But for tax purposes, for reporting purposes, that money just changed states. Second, moving the customer's high net worth clients, the people with 8, 9, 10 figures in assets, have choices you and I don't. Their advisors can say, if we book your accounts through our Florida entity, your tax and legal situation looks a lot better. Same screen when they log in. Same bank app, but now their wealth lives in Florida. Third, moving the business unit. Banks can pick up entire teams, traders, wealth managers, compliance officers, and say, we're relocating this division to Florida. From that point on, salaries are paid there, profits are counted there, and state-level taxes are owed there, not in California. So when you see $16 billion moves to Florida, don't think trucks. Think a silent drag and drop of profit, power, and future tax revenue from one state's spreadsheet to another's. Legal? Yes. Harmless? That's the question. Hey everyone, I'm Tom Veer, and you're watching Obscured Crimes, the channel where we look at the moves that shape your life long before they ever hit the evening news. Most crime we talk about on this channel involves something clearly illegal: hackers draining accounts, corporations lying to regulators, governments hiding operations. But sometimes the most devastating damage is done by people who follow the rules perfectly, because they helped write those rules. Today we're talking about a headline that sounds financial, maybe even a little boring. California's 174-year-old bank Wells Fargo moves to Florida with $16 billion. But behind that sentence is a quiet shift of power from one state to another, from one group of people to another. In this episode, we're going to cover what it actually means for a bank to move $16 billion, why California is slowly losing money and influence to Florida and other low-tax states, who wins, who loses, and whether this kind of move should be legal at all. Let's start by clearing one thing up. When a bank moves billions, what is actually happening? When average people hear Wells Fargo moves $16 billion to Florida, they imagine armored trucks, guards, and mountains of dollar bills rolling down a highway. But in 2026 America, that's not how power moves. Banks shift money in three main ways, and almost all of them are invisible. First, a line on a balance sheet inside Wells Fargo's systems. Deposits and assets are grouped under different entities: trust companies, wealth management units, regional subsidiaries. With a few board decisions and regulatory filings, those units can be re-domiciled. Yesterday, the legal home of these assets was California. Today, the legal home is Florida. No cash was moved. But for tax purposes, for reporting purposes, that money just changed states. Second, moving the customer's high net worth clients, the people with 8, 9, 10 figures in assets, have choices you and I don't. Their advisors can say, if we book your accounts through our Florida entity, your tax and legal situation looks a lot better. Same screen when they log in. Same bank app, but now their wealth lives in Florida. Third, moving the business unit. Banks can pick up entire teams, traders, wealth managers, compliance officers, and say, we're relocating this division to Florida. From that point on, salaries are paid there, profits are counted there, and state-level taxes are owed there, not in California. So when you see $16 billion moves to Florida, don't think trucks. Think a silent drag and drop of profit, power, and future tax revenue from one state's spreadsheet to another's. Legal? Yes. Harmless? That's the question. To really feel how big this shift is, you have to understand who is doing it. Wells Fargo isn't some random app that popped up last year. It was founded in 1852, in the heart of the California gold rush. Back then, its whole identity was stagecoaches, gold shipments, the Wild West, the promise that California was where fortunes were made. For over a century, California gave Wells Fargo its brand, its customers, its culture. The bank built branches on California's main streets, financed its homes and businesses, and took in the paychecks of millions of workers. Fast forward to the 21st century. Tech money in Silicon Valley, real estate booms in San Francisco and LA, IPOs, startup exits, stock-based wealth, a huge portion of that cash, ran through banks like Wells Fargo. California helped make Wells Fargo one of the most powerful financial institutions in the US, and now that same institution is reportedly shifting billions of dollars in assets to Florida, a state that had almost nothing to do with its original rise. On this channel, we ask, when an institution that grew rich in one place quietly moves its wealth somewhere else, is that just business, or is it a kind of economic hit and run? Before we answer, we need to compare the two states fighting for that money. Think of California and Florida like two rival crime families, except their weapons aren't guns. They're tax codes and regulations. California, the expensive golden child, high personal income tax for top earners, significant corporate taxes, strict environmental, labor, and housing regulations, sky-high real estate prices in major cities. In return, you get big public programs, stronger social safety nets, world-class universities, and the image of California. Tech, entertainment, culture, but if you're a billionaire, a hedge fund, or a giant bank, California also looks like a place that takes a big bite out of every dollar you make. Florida, the sunny tax haven without the offshore zero state income tax, aggressively business-friendly posture. Real estate that for a long time was cheaper than LA or San Francisco, a political brand of we love investors, we love high earners. Florida sells itself as everything you like about the US, but with Caribbean vibes and no state income tax. In the last decade, we've seen hedge funds opening in Miami, Wall Street firms bringing teams to Palm Beach, CEOs quietly changing their official residence from New York, or yes, California to Florida. So if you're Wells Fargo sitting in a California office, with analysts showing you two columns, column A, stay in California, keep paying some of the highest taxes in America, column B, move business units and booked assets to Florida, instantly improving after-tax profits. You don't need to be a criminal mastermind. You just need to read the math. Florida didn't steal Wells Fargo at gunpoint. It simply whispered, keep more of what you make. If you move the money here, on obscured crimes, we usually talk about robberies where someone loses money. This time, California is losing money because another state wrote a better offer. Is that fair competition? Or a slow-motion legal pickpocketing of one state by another? Let's talk about who gets hurt when a bank shifts billions out of California. It's not like Wells Fargo sends an email saying, Dear San Francisco, we're moving $16 billion. Here's who we're not helping anymore. Regards, management. The pain shows up indirectly. 1. The tax base shrinks when more profitable business is booked in Florida. A bigger share of profits become associated with Florida entities that can mean less corporate tax showing up on California's side of the equation. One bank move won't collapse the state, but repeated often enough, it's death by 1,000 cuts. The state still has pensions to fund, infrastructure to maintain, social programs to pay for. If the richest players move their chips elsewhere, guess who ends up making up the difference? Regular workers, small businesses, and people who can't move. 2. Jobs drift away, slowly high pay, white-collar jobs follow money. Wealth management teams setting up in Miami, compliance and legal teams growing in Tampa, new hiring focused on Florida offices, not California ones. No one puts "we're abandoning San Francisco" in a press release. But 5-10 years later, you look around and ask, why are there fewer opportunities here than there used to be? 3. The political narrative shifts when big banks, Elon-level billionaires, and major corporations say with their feet, "We'd rather be in Florida or Texas." That becomes a talking point. It pressures California to ask, are our taxes too high? Are our regulations too heavy? Or should we double down and risk more exits? Meanwhile, Florida's leaders hold up moves like this and say, see? We were right. The future of American money lives here now. And that's where the crime feeling creeps in. No law is broken. No one gets prosecuted. But entire communities can feel like the partner who built a life with someone rich, only to be left when the money finds a younger, cheaper place to go. On Obscured Crimes, we always come back to the same uncomfortable question. Just because something is legal, does that mean it's right? Wells Fargo, like any major bank, has teams of lawyers making sure moves like this are properly documented and compliant with regulations. Florida isn't doing anything illegal by offering low taxes. California isn't breaking laws by charging more. But step back and ask, who wrote the tax codes? Who lobbies for the loopholes? Who benefits when money can teleport between states with a few keystrokes, and who can't afford to follow? When California hits a budget problem, it doesn't send the bill to Wells Fargo. It sends it to people who can't move their job, renters, small business owners, regular taxpayers. That's why moves like this feel, to many people, like a form of economic betrayal. Use our state to grow, use our people's deposits and fees, then leave with the profits when a better deal shows up somewhere else. Is that crime? Not in court. But in the story of who wins and who loses, it's hard not to feel like someone just pulled a heist in broad daylight. And the only reason nobody calls it theft is because everyone signed the paperwork. Let's bring this back to you, the person watching this on your phone or TV. You might not control billions, but moves like this still matter. If you're in California, you're living in a state where the richest players are slowly testing the exits. That raises real questions about future taxes, jobs, and cost of living. If you're in Florida, you're in a state that's winning the money war, but that also means faster rising housing costs, more inequality, and a future where your city might start to look a lot more like the places people thought they were escaping. And no matter where you live, this is your reminder that the real power in our system often isn't in Congress or the White House, it's in boardrooms where a small group of executives can decide that $16 billion lives here now, and there tomorrow. The question we all have to ask is, are we okay with that power being this mobile, this unaccountable? Or will there be a moment where voters and lawmakers finally say, if you grew rich here, you don't get to vanish when the bill arrives? Outro and call to action, 1430, approximately 1530. So, when you hear, California's 174-year-old bank Wells Fargo moves to Florida with $16 billion, don't just hear a quirky finance story. Hear what it really is. A symbol of how money can abandon the places that built it with nothing more than a few signatures. Another chapter in the quiet war between high-tax and low-tax states. And maybe one of the most legal but most damaging kinds of obscured crime in our economy. If this video gave you a different way to think about that headline, hit like. It helps this kind of deep dive content reach more people. I want to hear from you in the comments. If you had to choose, would you rather live in California with higher taxes and big services, or Florida with lower taxes but a different model? And do you think moves like this are just smart survival by big banks, or something we should start treating as a crime against the public? I'm Tanvir. This is Obscured Crimes. Subscribe if you want more stories about the hidden decisions that shape your money, your country, and your future. Stay sharp, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next episode.